The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epocha in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from time forward forevermore. You will think me transported with enthusiasm, but I am not. I am well aware of the toil and blood and treasure that it will cost us to maintain this declaration and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is more than worth all the means, and that posterity will triumph in that day's transaction, even although we should rue it, which I trust in God we shall not. That was John Adams writing to his wife Abigail one day after the Continental Congress voted for independence. He ultimately got the date wrong. He thought we'd celebrate independence on July 2nd instead of the 4th when the Declaration was signed. But everything else, he was spot on. He was right about the celebrations, the games, the sports, the parades. He was right about the cost and the lives lost. But most importantly, he was right about the ends being worth the means. But increasingly in modern politics, people with real influence don't agree with me. They don't agree that the ends have been worth the means. To a growing number of people on both sides of the political aisle, the American flag is no longer a beacon of hope and freedom, but a symbol of oppression, a symbol of hatred. So the question we must ask today is this: will we make it another 250 years? How about another 50? Here's what gives me hope. We are, I'd argue, the most resilient country on earth, and we have the history to prove it. The history of our early nation is stained by slavery. But then we fought a war that killed 600,000 Americans to ensure that the words "all men are created equal" actually mean something. A civil war that should have ended the country, but ended up paving the way for the strongest country on earth. We committed horrible atrocities like the Trail of Tears. That was followed by granting citizenship, suffrage, and a long overdue reckoning with what our country did to those people. We went through the Great Depression, but our economy proved resilient enough to rebuild into what is today the strongest economy on earth. We've had many political assassinations, but each was met by a republic whose institutions do not depend on the life of any single man. We fought world wars and won. We won victories that secured freedom not just for us, but for the world. We've endured terror attacks we met not with retreat, but with the resolve to rebuild and refuse to live in fear. We've been tested with endless bouts of civil unrest, but through it all, we've learned that when we tear down our own landmarks, we have to talk to one another. We have to come together to find the mutual understanding needed to move forward as one. We've survived all of that, and we've come out all of it better than we were before. But the threat we face today is a different type of threat. It's not violence from abroad or unrest within. This time, it's an ideological threat, encroaching from both sides of the political aisle. And I'm not talking about Republicans and Democrats. I'm talking about the fringes, outside of either party, who are sensing that this is their moment to encroach on the middle. On the left, we have the Democratic Socialists of America, Mayor Mamdani in New York, and all the congressional candidates that just won their primaries over there. These people have abandoned the language of free markets, of private property, of individual rights. They've replaced it with socialism, redistribution, and the warmth of collectivism. They don't want to fix what they see as wrong with American capitalism. They want to replace capitalism. On the right, Tucker Carlson has said that feudalism, yes, medieval feudalism, is a better system than our system of free markets. He weaponizes the Christian faith to convince his listeners that oppressive communist regimes like Venezuela and Russia are actually better places than America. Feudalism, kings and serf, and a man who suggests that he wishes our nation were more like Putin's Russia. These two factions are working at the same time, competing for much of the same audience: young Americans who live their lives online. Both fringes have figured out how to package a rejection of this country as if it were the enlightened position. But beneath that mask, their fundamental goal is the same. Both factions look at the history of the most resilient nation to ever exist and see something to tear down. They believe the American system is not worth preserving. Both distrust free markets. Both distrust the prosperity that exists in the world solely because of the bravery and the economic system of the United States. We are living in the most prosperous time in human history. A poor person today lives better than the English and French kings of old. But somehow, socialism or feudalism is a better system than what the founders created. And that's what I don't respect. They look at a country with founders who had the foresight to build a constitution strong enough to last 250 years, longer than any other major nation on earth, and they see something to tear down. You can love this country and want to make changes. The Constitution allows for that. It's why we've lasted this long. But rejecting everything America was built upon, private property, free markets, and a strongly held faith in God, is not something I respect. But I think this nation will overcome this moment. Throughout our history, every threat we've ever faced looked unbeatable at the time. And every time, we faced it and we won. Free markets won. Private property won. The Constitution won. What we need now is the will to cut out the rot. We need people in both parties to stand up and reject anything that is plainly un-American, to reject those who would have us abandon the founding principles of this nation. Our ancestors did it in their time. Now it's our time to do it in ours. John Adams said that through his own gloom, he could see the rays of ravishing light and glory, that the end was worth the means, and that posterity would triumph. That wasn't a belief, but an assignment to all Americans, then, now, and in the years still to come. Subscribe and like the video for more from me. I'm trying to build a brand based on honest, reasonable takes and not the performative outrage you get from so many online these days. If that resonates with you, subscribe and head to my Substack to get new releases emailed directly to you. With that, I'll see you next time. Thank you.